We know the work of this man, John Walsh. He's the hard-driving host and the force behind the long-running America's Most Wanted television show.
There is evil that walks the planet. I mean, there is pure evil, and I hunt down pure evil.
The show has been responsible for helping to capture more than 1,000 fugitives and bring home many missing children in its several decades on television.
This is a bad day for you.
But sometimes, our life's work is a role we never sought, and that role becomes our finest hour.
Get back in the ring. Fight for that little boy. Make sure that that little boy didn't die in vain. Go battle for that missing children's bill. And I did.
We met John Walsh at the headquarters of the America's Most Wanted television show in Bethesda, Maryland, where they ring this bell every time a fugitive is captured. We sat down in the National Hotline Center, the room which receives calls from the public that leads to arrests based on information on the television show. John, thank you for joining us on My Generation.
Honored to be here.
Good. John, you've been at this for a long time with the television show and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You turned the most horrific tragedy, the kidnapping and murder of your young son, into your finest hour. What would you say you've accomplished?
Well, I don't know if I'm done accomplishing. But it's a path that I never ever dreamed that I'd be on. So I think the challenges were the start of this journey, and what I have accomplished was just dealing with Adam's murder. That was the toughest. That was the biggest and toughest challenge, was my only son being kidnapped and brutally murdered, decapitated. And that first challenge was just to keep from dying of a broken heart, to slipping under the water.
Okay, but just a second, but there you were, that close to
that
dying
close.
of a broken heart, right?
That close.
Right. And yet you rose up and accomplished a huge amount.
Well, I 90% of marriages of parents of murdered children wind up in divorce. So my wife and I had nothing in common but the murder of our only child. So as I watched my business evaporate, my inability to go to work, all the things that define men, particularly men, I think women also, their identity is their success in business, and you're the breadwinner. As I watched all that evaporate, I started to watch my marriage evaporate, and I started, spiraling down into hell, into that hell of sadness and anger and depression. And it was really my wife who focused me in, because she was in the garage answering tens of thousands of letters that were sent to just the parents of Adam, Adam's mom, Adam's dad, Hollywood, Florida, and creating what has become the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, while I was sitting in the living room thinking about killing myself and what happened to my ability to make a living, and most of all, how people couldn't understand that I was dying of a broken heart, because the loss of a child is unbearable. And she turned around one day and said, I think we have, and I think you, John, have forgotten who the real victim was. It's not you, it's not me, it was Adam. It was that 6-year-old boy that went through the kidnapping and the torture and the murder. So let's do something about it. Let's make sure he didn't die in vain. And it was her who sort of focused me out of the sorrow and anger and bitterness that had encompassed me.
And it's been decades, and you have accomplished a huge, huge amount. If you had to look inside yourself and say, I did it because once I got moving, I had this quality, what would that quality be?
I think it was the wonderful role model parents I had that installed that quality in me, particularly my dad, who was
what quality is that?
fighting back. My father had the saying, and I say it all the time, saddle up, and get in the ring. I boxed in college and played soccer, and he always used to say, hit the bell. And people don't know what hit the bell means. It means if you're sitting on your stool in a fight and you're exhausted and tired and ready to throw it in and you think you're beat, you hit the bell and go out, because sometimes the other guy doesn't make it off the seat. You got to hit the bell. So my father was a World War II hero, B-24 bomber pilot, 15 medals. He was a huge role model. And he installed that kind of Irish fight back, that, saddle up, get back in there and keep fighting.
Did you ever hear what John Wayne said about courage? John Wayne said, courage is being scared to death, but going out and saddling up anyway. So, John, what would you say to a person who's really down? They're flat. Something terrible has happened to them, whatever reason, What does it take to get up off the mat and prevail against adversity?
I think everybody, somehow in their life, is presented with challenges. You know that old saying, nobody gets out of this life alive? I think everybody is presented with challenges, some greater than others. If you're a victim of the Holocaust or you're given a terrible disease, those are challenges that people have to surmount. And I was given a real challenge, and I think you stop feeling sorry for yourself. You start thinking about the people that love you and helped you and supported you, and you get back in. You saddle up. You literally saddle up, and you go in there and you try to make sure that your life has some merit to it. And everybody has those challenges, Bill. Everybody. Maybe people look at you and think, God, how did you ever come back from the horrible murder of your son and losing your life's business and all the things that went along with it? But I always say, then you meet somebody that's in a worse situation with you, and you meet someone who's lost 2 children, or you meet someone who's dying of an incurable disease, and you go, I ought to stop feeling sorry for myself. I ought to get back in the game. I ought to settle up. There's a lot of people that depend on me and love me, and I ought to get back in the fight.
Was there one moment when the switch went on and you sprang into action?
I think when I went to try to get Adam's remains, after we'd had a memorial service for Adam, who my cousin is a Monsignor, came and tried to get through the eulogy and talk about Adam, couldn't get through it, and I was at my most darkest point, and I'd gotten all kinds of advice from rabbis and Protestant ministers and Catholic priests. None of it worked for me. I really felt there was no God, no higher power, and I went to go get Adam's remains. I called up the Broward County Medical Examiner and said, look, I need to bury this little boy. I need to honor him. I need to have somewhere to go and honor him. And the coroner said, come to my office. I work late at night. He was a famous medical examiner and lawyer. He was CSI before there was CSI. He was a forensic specialist. And I got up into his office and he said to me, his name is Dr. Ronald Wright. And he did Elvis's autopsy and a lot of very important things and was an expert witness 30 years ago. And I got in his office and I said, I want Adam's remains and I want them tomorrow. And I want to bury that little boy. And he said, you can't have his remains. You can't take him back. It's evidence in a capital murder. And until the capital murder is solved, you'll never get Adam's remains. And he said, you look terrible. You really look awful. And he said, I'll bet you're becoming a double victim. And I said, what is a double victim? And he says, when people are victims of terrible crimes or circumstances in lives, they become a second victim. You've lost tons of weight. You look horrible. And he said, and I'll bet you've given up any belief in anything. And I said, you have no right to tell me this. I don't want to hear any lectures. I don't want to hear any speeches. And I said, how do you do it? How do you do these autopsies on these murdered little girls? How do you look at Adam's head and prepare in case we ever get to a trial? He goes, I believe in a higher power. And I said, I don't want any religious sermon here. He said, I don't know whether that higher power is Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu. He said, but I believe you're given a free will. He said, and you can either do evil with it, like probably the man who murdered your son. He's probably a pedophile, and he was right. He's probably a serial killer. He probably hunts children. And he's selfish, and he's narcissistic, and I'll bet that's who killed your son. And I do these autopsies on these little girls and these kids because I present cases. I choose to do good. I believe in a higher power, that you're given this chance to make a choice. Do good, do evil, but it's free will. And he said, I put these guys in death row. I help the cops. I help the prosecutors. And I get justice for these victims. And he says, look, you mounted the largest search effort for a missing child. You use your business contacts, the airlines, you did things that were never done. He said, you know, there's a bill before Congress called the Missing Children's Bill. The FBI opposes it, the Justice Department. It would simply give parents the right to put their kid in the FBI computer, which they wouldn't do for you, and the FBI wouldn't help you. He said, why don't you go battle for that bill? Why don't you make a difference? You can do that. He said, look at all the people who help you. And he said, if you're thinking about suicide, and I said, it's an option for me. And I said, you have no right to tell me not to kill myself. I have no business. I can't speak to my wife. My whole life is disintegrating. He said, you'd be a coward. I said, I'm not a coward. He says, I know you're not a coward. You're a fighter. He said, so get back in the ring. Fight for that little boy. Make sure that that little boy didn't die in vain. Go battle for that missing children's bill. And I did, and it got passed.
He brought you back. All right, let's move to, I believe it's 1982. You're in the Rose Garden. President Ronald Reagan is signing the Missing Children Act. Recall your feelings on that day, John.
It was an incredible day I'll never forget, because we had Megan. We had a brand new daughter. So you can't replace Adam. He was this beautiful little boy. And a child doesn't replace a murdered child or a child that died in any way. But we had this gorgeous little girl. We had this beautiful blessing. And there's President Reagan signing a bill that had huge opposition by the FBI and the Justice Department. They even made a quote to the New York Times saying, this bill will never pass. That couple in Florida can go pound salt. And there I was that day. The good had prevailed. Our battle maybe made a big difference. And here was the United States President signing this bill to make sure that now parents could put their information in the FBI and maybe get some children back alive. It was a glorious day. There was Hervé. We're still together, and we've got this beautiful brand new baby. It was a wonderful day.
I want to read, could someone hand me this book, please? Thanks. From your book about that day in the Rose Garden with Ronald Reagan, that's when I realized that a heartbroken couple from Florida with no money and no lobby and no resources and nobody behind them except a bunch of caring, passionate people with no real power had actually helped get a federal bill passed. Moment that's part of your finest hour for certain.
Without a doubt, and it proved to me that this may be and probably is the greatest country in the world, because democracy does work here, and somebody can start from a terrible position of tragedy and affect the national law and a national movement. So it was one of the finest hours.
John, what's new in the world of helping families, finding missing children, hunting fugitives? It's different than when you first started.
Things have changed dramatically. You know, it took 27 years to solve Adam's case. There was no DNA. There was a suspect that died on death row, not for Adam's murder, but for other murders. And that case probably would have been solved right after Adam was murdered if there was DNA, if there was a National Center for Missing Exploited Children, if the FBI had not refused to get in Adam's case. So much has changed. So now we have lots of better cooperation between law enforcement. Now we have the Amber Alert, which took 3 years to get through Congress. As crazy as that is. Now,
what happens with the Amber Alert?
As soon as a child goes missing in that area, the National Broadcasting Service that used to warn us about hurricanes and storms that took forever to get them to do Amber Alerts, 3 years in battling Congress, now alerts in that area over television, road signs, over radio that a child is missing. The first year that the Amber Alert was passed, 17 children were recovered alive because the first 4 hours is crucial. When that guy grabs your kid, the first 4 hours is crucial. In Adam's case, they never really started looking for Adam till 24 hours later. So we have the Amber Alert, we have the National Center, we have the media involved. I always said the media was crucial. Back in Adam's case never made it to national headlines. Nobody was looking for him except the Hollywood police. He hadn't even made it into other counties. He wasn't a high priority. Now the media swoops in. You know it, Bill. You see it. A child goes missing. The media is there. The family gets help. All those things have changed, and law enforcement has changed their attitude. That's been a battle of mine for years to say, The one way you reduce crimes against anybody, the public and children, is cooperation between local, county, state, and federal agencies. Now we have joint fugitive task forces, we have DNA, we have the internet, we have a lot of tools that can make it safer for children.
You've definitely used the most popular medium of entertainment, television, in a transactional way, for good. What else would you like to see TV doing?
I think that television could do more with cases of missing children, keeping the faces alive, keeping the hope alive from the parents. I never wanted to be a fugitive hunter. I think America's Most Wanted has proved for 24 years that you can get ratings, you can make money, you can be a popular show, and you still can provide a public service. We catch the worst of the worst all over the world.
Beyond your field of crime, fugitives, and missing children, anything else come to mind that you would like to see television doing for the greater good of society?
Absolutely. I think television certainly could get in the realm of missing adults. America has tens of thousands of missing adults and missing women, people still buried in unmarked graves. I think some way television could help that out. And I think television could do a much better job of educating people about everything that's out there. Because I'm proactive. I'm a proactive person. The one thing I've learned in these 30 years is, yeah, when the guy's really bad, he makes it to America's Most Wanted, and then I try to hunt him down so he gets punished. Let's educate people about what's out there and be proactive. And I think television, yeah, you know, entertainment is the big objective in making money. But I really think it is a powerful tool for education, educating people how to be safer, how to be healthier, to educate them what's going on, what's available, what they could do. I mean, we are the greatest, richest, most powerful country in the world, and I think television, and I'm on it, and I respect my peers, and I've been the third longest running primetime television show in the history of TV. I think we can do a way better job of educating people in this country.
You're obviously a man who doesn't take no for an answer, right? What are the positives and negatives of having that personality quality?
I think there are a lot of positives because you're stubborn and you try to figure out ways to do it. And in my old age, I think I'm starting to realize that no isn't a bad thing, and that you do realize sometimes that you can't accomplish something. But I've also learned that that stubbornness and not taking no can motivate people, and it can get people to get behind you, people that don't necessarily have a voice. I mean, I think, and maybe kind of pretentious, but I really think I speak for a lot of silent voices. I think that I speak loudly for women and children who are victimized and don't have the voice that I do.
Anything on the negative side of not taking no for an answer?
Sometimes sometimes you don't further your cause because you're so stubborn and you're so boisterous. But I think I'm starting to learn that there's other ways of skinning the cat than by being the guy that's constantly knocking on the door and saying, why aren't you doing this?
You've been honored by both the FBI, the U.S. Marshals. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot to me because law enforcement are my partners. I started out in an adversarial way. Only in America could you hate and be mad at the FBI and wind up catching 17 of their top 10 and being FBI Man of the Year and being honored by the FBI. That's what's great about America. You can come to terms and you can bury those hatchets. Those honors from law enforcement are wonderful. They sort of validate that partnership. I mean, 140 cops died in the line of duty last year, so I have great respect for law enforcement and the criminal justice system. So those awards are very, very special to me because I think they look at me as not somebody in the media, but somebody as a trusted partner, somebody that'll go that extra mile with them to get justice.
You know, you've worked with 4 presidents. The walls are lined with accomplishments. What would you say is your most significant accomplishment? One top of the heap list.
The beautiful children I've been blessed to have, and the wonderful wife who stuck with me through all this stuff. I mean, my father used to say, having children is the toughest job in the world, but it's the best job in the world. And I've been blessed with 4 beautiful children and a wife I'm still married to after 40 years.
I think that's very impressive with all that you've done for society, that it comes back to the family unit, John. doesn't it?
It's a blessing. They're gifts. Children are gifts. That's why I think most people identify with me with the fact that you can't imagine how anybody could hurt children. But people hurt children all over the world. They don't realize what a treasure and a gift they really are, and what a responsibility. It is the hardest job, and it is the most rewarding job. So all those other things are awards and plaques, and they're all nice, but to look at these children and say, that's the best job I've done, and a reflection of yourself.
For all the people who've been watching you all these years in so many different capacities, just for fun, tell us one thing about yourself that you don't think people know.
That I have a sense of humor, that I'm a wise guy, and I do laugh, and I do enjoy life, and I feel that I'm blessed, and that when I'm not hunting fugitives and trying to change laws and trying to get right the wrongs, that I'm a fun person. I enjoy and relish every day I have, and know that I'm blessed. I've had some horrible things happen to me in my life and some tough challenges, but I'm also a blessed guy.
Let's think about a couple people watching now, grandparents or parents who see you as a positive force. They want to instill one or two things in their child or their grandchild that will help them prevail in life. Give them one or two things that you think children need to hear. I
think grandparents and parents have to get by one thing. They can't say it can't happen to me because I live in Beverly Hills or the Hamptons. Bill Cosby said it best. His son was killed for a Mercedes-Benz in Beverly Hills. Michael Jordan's father was murdered for a car. My son was hunted down like a toy by a pedophile. And it doesn't matter where you live in America, violence can impact you. So then look at the positive, proactive side. Talk to your kids. Get solid, good information about what you should be telling your children. Safety on the internet. It's the private hunting ground for predators. Yes, kids are going to have Facebook pages. My kids do. The internet's a wonderful tool. I've caught 40 guys in the last 2 years from the internet, but it's also a bad place where bad people will try to lure your children. They'll try to get them to meet them somewhere at a mall or a park or whatever. Get good, solid information about the rules of good. There's a big case that I'm involved with in Canada where an 8-year-old girl was kidnapped from a bus stop. Repeatedly, I've been involved in hundreds of cases. You ask most people, do you have a game plan if you take your kid to the circus or you take them to the mall and you get separated? The kids know the answers better than the parents. They go, did you never think about that before you left the house? What do you do if we're separated at a Giants game or we're separated at the Super Bowl? So good, solid information. And talking to your kids, value them and love them, but they need to be armed with the tools. They need to know what to do if they're presented with situations. I think that's an obligation that grandparents and parents have.
One other question in the same realm, personality traits. What personality traits would you like to see parents and grandparents help instill in their children in order for them to be happy and prevail in life?
I think you have to hold your kids accountable. You have to give them accountability. You have to parent up. I see so many people that want to be best friends with their kids, and their kids are so entitled, and I think somewhere we've lost that direction that I see in lots of other countries that I've been into the Far East and into Europe, that children are a blessing, but they're a responsibility. Set boundaries, hold them accountable for their actions, and express that love. I see lots of people who always say to me, my child's gone or my child was killed. I wish that I'd have hugged them. I wish I'd have kissed them and told them how much I loved them and how much they were valued.
That's so sad. John, for so many years you've been immersed in a world of immorality, murder, violence, abuse. Does it color your view of humanity?
It doesn't, and because I have seen the good side of people and traveled the world and hunted fugitives all over the world. There's one universal theme. It doesn't matter what your race, religion, color, where you live is. People are basically, and people will help and get involved, and it's been proven to me. I didn't get all these laws passed in every state and visit these other countries or get these laws passed in Congress by myself or my wife and I. We had lots and lots and lots of help. I really believe that the vast majority of people on this planet are good people.
John, I want to thank you for being with us on My Generation and for giving us insights into your life, which has been your finest hour. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Honored to be here, Bill.
My pleasure.